I held it together till I got to the car. And I called my husband, and I was a blubbering mess.
Hi, this is Patrick.
And this is Laura.
And you're listening to This is Cancer.
Brought to you by Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital and Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. National leaders in cancer.
This is our first official episode. We recorded the pilot. The people at Siteman said, fine, you can keep doing it. Not that bad. And now we've got our first guest on.
And we thought that we would start this podcast with what probably starts most people off on their journey to either why they're listening to this or why they want to hear more about it, which is when you hear the words, you have cancer. So I want to welcome Aleta to the show.
Hey, guys.
Aleta is our colleague and friend, and I think it's safe to say you probably like me better than Patrick. But
well, I've known you longer.
That's right. You've known me longer.
Well, that doesn't mean that she likes you better, though.
Right. But
it just means that she's known you longer.
Let's assume. We wanted to have Aleta on the show today because you have heard those words, this is cancer, or you have cancer, more than once.
Yes.
You've heard it twice. And you're still in the sort of the end of your second journey.
Yeah, I'm still in recovery. I think it's safe to say I'm still going through some treatments and procedures and surgeries to get past number 2.
And so I really want to talk with you about number 2. But first, I feel like we should go backwards to the first time you were told that you had cancer, which was...
It was in 2014. So January of 2014, actually. It was the beginning of the year, right after the holidays. Had religiously been doing my mammograms since I was 40. And so I was going in for a routine mammogram of what I thought was just going to be any other kind of morning. I would go to get my tests, go to work, and everything would be fine. And oddly enough, when I checked in, the nurse at the desk said, your insurance will not pay for this, but we're doing 3D mammograms. And for $20 extra for out of pocket, if you would like that, we can do that for you today. And I thought, sure, why not? $20. And typically my mammograms were pretty normal. I would go in and leave. This time I was told, can you go back and sit down and we're going to come back and get you and we're going to do a second one. And I was like, okay.
Were you already thinking something's up at that point?
Well, I just, no, because, I have friends, I have family members who are like, they have denser breast tissue. And so that's not uncommon to kind of do another look, so to speak. So I thought, well, maybe that's what's going on. So I did, and they went back. We did it a second time. And then they came back and said, you know what, I think we want to do an ultrasound as well. And so now at this point, I'm like, what are they seeing? And at that point, a radiologist came in after the ultrasound and said, we see a mass. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's cancer. We need to do more tests. We need to get you in with a doctor, but we're very suspicious of what we see. I held it together till I got to the car. And I called my husband, and I was a blubbering mess, because not even at that point had I heard, you have cancer, but we see something that could be cancer. And so it was, it kind of blew me right off my feet.
And Aleta, real quick, how old were your kids at the time?
I have, at the time, my daughter was 8 and my son was 6. The other thing that was kind of coming into play here was that we had just gone through a very long illness with my mother-in-law, who also was suffering from breast cancer. She was just about to hit her 5-year mark, and she took a turn for the worse and had passed away 2 weeks before that. So, there was a lot going on in my head. And I didn't tell my kids because I didn't want them to associate what had happened with their grandmother to what might be happening with their mom. So after my husband calmed me down and I felt like I could drive home, I did not go to work that day. I went home. And on the way home, I have a very dear friend who is very connected in the Barnes Jewish WashU medical group. Mm-hmm. And I called him and I told him what was going on. He's like, oh, no, you got to go to Siteman. Because I was not at Siteman for my mammogram. I was at another facility. And he said, give me 5 minutes. And he hung up, called me back, and he's like, you're going in to see Dr. Julie Morgan-Taylor in 2 weeks. I knew I wanted a second opinion when I left, just for my own peace of mind. But to know that I was going to be going to Siteman, that's where I wanted to be.
And for those people that are listening for the first time, Siteman Cancer Center is located in St. Louis, Missouri, and one of the national leaders in cancer in the country, supported by Washington University physicians and well known throughout the country for its research, its treatment, and it's known in the St. Louis metropolitan parts of Illinois area that if you have cancer, that you want to be able to get to Siteman because that's where the experts live, breathe, research, do everything.
Right. They're on the cutting edge of everything that's going on in any kind of cancer research. So I knew I wanted to go there. But to get in with Dr. Morgan Taylor was fantastic in my mind. So I did go to Siteman a couple of weeks later. They did a mammogram again. She confirmed, and she told me that this is cancer. And I had invasive ductal carcinoma, which is a very common form of breast cancer. But it doesn't matter. When you hear those words, it's cancer. That's all you hear. My husband was with me at the time, and so we were able to deal with it together and talk with her thoroughly about options and what we could do. Obviously, the options were lumpectomy, mastectomy. They wanted to do a biopsy, so I did go back a couple of days later for the biopsy. And my cancer was so small, they almost got it with the biopsy. I mean, it was caught very early, and I attribute that solely to that 3D mammogram.
And it's just so true that if you can get that mammogram and catch breast cancer early, there have been so many advances and so many breast cancers are treatable if found early.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely. And I am, any young woman I meet, I'm like, go get your mammogram. I'm a huge advocate of starting that as soon as you're able to. And do not hesitate. Do not go 1 month past that year for the next one because it's so important that people are screened.
When are you supposed to start doing mammograms?
Age 40. Unless you have a family history, and then you should be getting it done earlier than that. And it's really something that every woman should be discussing their family history with their doctor, their gynecologist especially. They'll really help you figure out when the best time is to get that mammogram. But family history plays a huge part, but 40 is when you should be getting your yearly mammograms. As I spoke about in the pilot, my sister had breast cancer and found it early and also is cancer-free because she found that early. Real quick, though, can you take us back to do you remember where you were? Was it face-to-face? Was it on the phone when Dr. Morgan Taylor said you have cancer?
Yeah, I was at home when I got the phone call, and she is wonderful. Let me just say first off, she is such a personable person, and she truly takes in your story, and she just really is a caring person. And she talked to me on the phone, and she said, I hate to tell you this. She said, I never like to deliver this news, but as we suspected, this is breast cancer. And then she just began to tell me what was going to happen. And your heart just drops. I mean, I think at that moment, you want to believe that it's not up until you hear those words. You want to have some little hope. But when you hear it, I went into, okay, we're going to tackle it. We're going to go beat it. We're going to take this and I have little kids. You know, the first thing that goes through your head is, I want to be here when my daughter walks down the aisle. I want to see my kids graduate. So how are you going to do that? Well, you're going to beat it. You're going to take care of this, and you're going to get past it, and it's not going to be a major factor in your life anymore. We decided to do a lumpectomy because it was so small, and recovery was really easy, a couple of weeks. I had a little different situation. I did not have to have chemo or any kind of radiation, what you suspect as radiation. I did have radiation, but it was because I'm at Siteman, I'm at a research facility. They had a newer treatment at the time called the Savvy brachytherapy, which is radiation, but it's very targeted. So I had like a tube inserted into my breast to the point of where the tumor was. And I went for 5 days, 2 times a day. And it was like a 30-minute process. They would hook me up and they would put these radiation tubes into the spot of my breast and literally target that area for 30 minutes. And the thing that saved me on that was I didn't have the natural scarring that goes along with a lot of radiation or burning and the side effects that go with radiation. So it was a really, really good option for me.
And didn't you have to get on a medication as well that put you into early menopause?
I did. After all of that, after all my treatments and my healing, I did go on tamoxifen. And that typically you're on for 5 years. And the whole point of that is to literally drain your body of hormones, because a lot of breast cancers feed off of hormones in your body. And so, yeah, I went through early menopause, which was a nightmare. That was worse than the lumpectomy. It's a lot of sweating and hot flashes and mood changes and, bless my husband. But we made it. And at 5 years, my doctor, my oncologist, we discussed whether at that time, right as I was hitting the 5-year mark, a new study had come out that talked about there might be some benefits of extending that to women to continue to take it into 7, maybe even 10 years. And we talked about it. We did some testing on my tumor that they could see exactly what my chances were of having a reoccurring cancer of that form. And it was very low. And so I honestly was tired of taking it and just wanted to kind of get life back, or what I thought was going to be life. And so we went off of it at that time. But things were going good.
That's a pretty reasonable choice when you've taken something like that for 5 years and they tell you it's basically done all it's going to do for you, because the side effects of stuff like that is not fun.
Yep.
If it's keeping me alive, I'm fine with it.
Right.
But once they tell you the shelf life of this is done, man, you're ready to throw those suckers in the garbage.
That's very true. I was ready. I was done with cancer at that point. I felt like, my gosh, we had come through it so well. And a big thing I've always said from the get-go is, positivity matters. You have to take this by the bull by the horns, and you have to say, you're not going to get me down. I'm doing this, and I'm going to get past it. I'm going to get beyond it. And I was at that point. I was like, we've done it. We beat this thing. And we did. This particular cancer, we beat.
You did. And then ironically, about September of 2021, you go get another mammogram.
Yep. Yeah, I had gone in for my routine mammogram in September of 2021. And this time I was with Dr. Morgan Taylor. I saw her that morning, and she was like, let's go get the mammogram. They read them that day. So I was back in her office waiting for them to come back and talk to me. And she walked in and she was like, well, we see something. And she said, I think we need to investigate this. She said, I'm pretty sure she didn't say cancer. It was a different form of what I'd had before. What I had before was invasive. This was not invasive. It was ductal carcinoma, which means it was in the milk duct and was encased. It had not made it into any of my tissue outside of my milk duct. And so she said, we see something, and it was not a mass. It was like granular bits of something. So she wanted to do another mammogram and ultrasound, and it was bigger than she thought it was, but it was longer. It reached further back into the duct than what we originally thought.
Was this the same breast?
Yes, same breast. Yep. Which was a surprise, but again, they were not related cancers in that one had gone into the tissue, the others was encased in the. And in fact, she said, we don't even give this a stage. It's stage 0. So we talked about options. We originally talked about another lumpectomy, that might be a possibility. But when we got the second mammogram back and found that it extended further and longer in the breast than what they thought, she's like, I don't think that's an option. Mastectomy is what we need to look at. Now, she said it's up to you whether you do the single or the double.
What do you remember about hearing that the second time? Because I remember talking to you before you went into that investigation, and I'm like, I'm sure it's not. You're like, I hope. But I think you had some prior knowledge from talking to her more than you were sharing, that you kind of knew that it might be that. What was different, or what was the same about hearing it the second time versus the first?
While I try and stay positive, one thing that always creeps into my mind over the years is, when are they going to find it again? And where are they going to find it again? So when they noticed an irregularity in that first mammogram in September, I kind of had a feeling that it was cancer. I can't tell you why. First time around, we did not tell the kids, so they had no idea. They knew I'd had a surgery and that I was healing, but they didn't really know why. This time, we were very upfront and honest with everybody, quite honestly. Coworkers, family, friends, just because it's important for people to know that they've got to stay on top of this stuff. And if my story can help some people do that, then, I was really selfish to keep it to myself before.
Well, I don't know. I mean, selfish, like...
I didn't want people to know I had cancer.
Because people look at you differently.
Well, that's true.
I mean for better or worse,
I know what you're saying.
There's support that comes with it,
right.
But...
There's also the awe factor.
Look at how I'm looking at how I'm looking at Patrick right now.
Yeah. Stop it. I hate that look.
I know.
My dad was like that. It's not their business. They don't need to know.
Well, and I'm just a pretty independent person. I don't like feeling
attention.
I don't like attention, and I don't feel like I need anybody's help. I can do this. I'm supposed to take my kids to all these different places, even if I'm bone tired, or I don't feel well, or I've got patches all over the left side of my breast because I just had a lumpectomy. I just felt like, okay, this is happening. This is life. It's my life. So let's get on with it and get back to normal.
You're basically just a badass.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that.
That's okay. We're in a safe space. One of the things I want to ask, though, and we won't go too far into it because I think we're going to do another episode on this, just briefly share the emotional toll of trying to figure out what you were going to do this time around, because you went around and around and around in your head on a lumpectomy versus a double mastectomy.
Yeah.
And you felt bad about being vain about it, right? Which is okay to be. So explain a little bit about what that process, kind of like the overarching, like, it's not easy to have to remove your breasts.
No.
It's a huge pain in the ass.
No. Well, and I mean, there's health issues that go along with that. I mean, there's so much that you have to think about. And when she first told me a lumpectomy might be an option for me, I was really thankful for that because I knew that. I knew what that was going to be like. A double mastectomy or a mastectomy, you began to think, if this can happen a second time, it can happen a third time and a fourth time. And so let's just take care of that. Let's not have that be an option anymore. So I knew that if I did the mastectomy, I would get rid of both of my breasts. But it was a really tough decision because I am a vain person. My mother-in-law had a mastectomy, but she just did the one side. And I knew issues that she had with that, and both physical and just mental of dealing with that. Mentally, I didn't know what I would think of myself. I'm vain, but I'm also insecure. But then I was also not prepared for. I mean, you literally are taking off a part of your body. Now, you may not think you use that part of your body, but there's still a part of you that is not there anymore. And that's really hard to get your arms around and say, is that okay? And how will that feel? And how will I feel about that and myself? And what will, God bless my husband. He has been with me every step of the way. And, to him, it's like, it's your decision. I have no say in this whatsoever. And he's been incredible through all of this. And even now, I don't know if I made the right decision, but I think I would have worried if I'd gone with the lumpectomy route as to when is this going to happen again? When is this going to happen again? So, yeah, it was a struggle to make that decision.
I keep mentioning this Learning with National Leaders, which is this live stream that we do with Siteman Cancer Center with a panel of physicians, as we did one on breast reconstruction recently. And we couldn't get the folks that were watching to stop putting questions in because there's so many decisions to be made about the type of reconstruction. If they can save your nipple, if they can't, what your sensation is going to be like, what to put in the breast. Do you do silicone or do you do saline? It's usually not just one surgery. It's 1, 2, or 3 surgeries after you have the double. You have to get the breast removed, then you have to have the implant, the temporary implants, and you get the implants put in. There's often complications. That process, even if you get a double mastectomy after breast cancer especially, is not just get the surgery and done. It is a much longer process, as most people don't realize. You just had another surgery.
Yeah, I'm 3 weeks out from reconstruction surgery number 2. And that doesn't even count the double mastectomy surgery. So this was essentially this last round. This is my third surgery. And I probably am looking at least another one.
Because you had an implant that flipped.
Both of my implants flipped. Actually, they found that out in the surgery. I knew one had flipped over, but when they got in there, they found both had. And then along with fixing the implants, they did liposuction to help give me a better profile.
Because when they take your breasts, when they remove your breasts, there's no muscle or anything there that we naturally have as women. So they have to try to fill that space.
Yeah, I know I did. I think everybody thinks, well, you have a double mastectomy, and if you choose to do reconstruction, you're going to have these beautiful boobs,
Barbie boobies
that you see people who go through plastic surgery to have enhancements. That's what you think you're going to have. And when mine were not looking that way, I was like, what the heck? What's going on here? And it was explained to me, well, the difference is we took every bit of tissue we could possibly take because they don't want it coming back. That leaves you down to your chest wall. And so what we're doing is not enhancing, we're replacing.
We're building breasts for you. And we were just talking earlier this morning about that liposuction. They take the fat from your stomach to help fill that. My sister had the same thing, and she said it was the most painful thing out of any of the surgeries, and you're still dealing with pain from that.
With it, yeah. And every time your body changes, those implants change and how they look and how they sit on your body or in your body. So, yeah, I mean, it's ongoing. It's ongoing.
And you have scars and reminders and
I have extra skin. There's so much that I was not aware of. And nobody could tell you this because it's your body. It's how your body reacts to what you're going through and what's left over. So,
and one thing I really want to ask real quick, too, that I think could be important for those that are maybe listening right now that have been recently diagnosed or love someone who has. Talk about the importance this time of finding other women to talk to and get their advice and how that helped you, because you are not supposed to know the playbook on how to navigate this or how to feel about this.
Right. It was huge. It was huge to be able to know people, talk to people who had gone through it, just hearing their thought processes and their recovery and how they approach certain things and what they did from down to what sports bra they bought to help them, in recovery. And I didn't talk to anybody before. So I talked to a lot of people, and it was very comforting, very telling to me about things that I needed to do to prepare myself, even with kids, how they told their kids and how their kids deal with it. So yeah, it was a huge help to me to have a community of people. And I hope I can be that for other people.
And we're going to talk a little bit later in this podcast about sort of the mental side of this and sort of the trauma that you go through that people don't usually afford someone that's like, oh, well, you just get your double mastectomy and you'll be all better. And they don't realize how much of a toll this takes on you in so many ways. And so I'm really looking forward to speaking with someone with Siteman later about that mental side of hearing those words.
It goes on long past.
Yeah, for sure.
End of treatment.
And the honesty is appreciated. At least it was for me. When I called these people, it was not, oh, you're going to get through this and it's all fine and dandy. They were honest with the pain, what they had to deal with, the drains that I had to deal with afterwards. It was awful.
Nobody talks about the drains.
Well, I had people who did, because I said, I want to know what I'm in for if I make this decision. And it was helpful because then when I had to deal with it, it's like, okay, here's what they were talking about.
Drain talk.
And what they're talking about is drains that are left to collect all of the fluids that are coming out as your body heals, that you then have to have a pouch pocket on the side of your pajamas. So you better make sure you get the right pajamas post-surgery. You want to have a button up in the front and all these things, the wedge pillow to sleep on. All these things that I only know about because of my friends that have gone through it and my sister that no one talks about.
They're so gnarly. They're like little blood grenades.
Because you had that with your lung.
Oh my God. I had like
a wound vac.
I had like a shop vac.
Yeah.
It was like in a little suitcase at the edge of my bed.
That you have to manage all the time.
It was so gross.
Gross, right. Yes. So I'm so glad you had those people to talk with and to be able to share your experience and learn from them. So you were way more prepared than I think some women don't know, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to ask the questions. But I think the vulnerability of saying, can you help me? Can you talk me through this? really ends up helping you mentally in the end.
Oh, I agree. 100%.
We brag a lot on the Siteman Cancer Center on this podcast because it's easy to. They're literally top 10 in the nation. They've got the expertise of more than 450 Washington University research scientists and physicians who provide care for nearly 50,000 people a year. That's a lot of people in a year. They've got multidisciplinary teams with specialists in all types of cancers and areas of treatment. And if you are looking for a cancer specialist at Siteman Cancer Center, all you've got to do is go to siteman.wustl.edu or just click on the link in our episode description. I'm always interested to hear what people got out of their experience with cancer. As horrible as an experience as having cancer can be, what positives did you get out of cancer?
Well, first off, I gained some friends. Talking to these other women, there's a community of people out there that I was not aware of the first time I went through this because I secluded myself from it. But survivors are everywhere. It's amazing to me when you start talking to people who will raise their hand and say, yeah, I've been through this too. So friendship, first of all, a lot of living in the moment versus worrying about everything and what's tomorrow going to bring. Just live in the moment. This life is too short. And having this twice has opened my eyes to the fact that life is good, and just enjoy it while you can and have fun with your kids. Don't sweat the small stuff. Work is work, but your family and your health is everything. So I've changed. I've had a shift in my mindset as to what's important in my life. And just probably my faith has grown through this as well, knowing I'm here for a reason and I have more to do and more to tell and hopefully people to help with what I have to share with them.
And it's always interesting to me when you talk to some people that say, why me? And then other people will say, well, why not me? Questioning it sometimes is probably going to drive you crazy anyway either, too. Right. Sometimes there's family history. Sometimes there's no reason that they can find in the world that you have it. But having that support system around you and good doctors and a good community and good advocates like Jerry. But I do have to ask, there had to have been things that really helped you and things that didn't. So if there's people that are listening that are like, oh my gosh, my friend, my husband, my cousin, my coworker, someone just got diagnosed. What do I do? Let's start with what worked, what helped.
Just people being willing to be there. I think what doesn't work are those people who try too hard. They hear this and they immediately go to the other side of, you may not have seen these people for a year and a half. And now all of a sudden they're on your doorstep saying, what can I do? What do you need? Where can I take you? And it's like, I'm good. I have plenty of support.
I was good for the last year without seeing your ass. Why do I think I need you now?
You can just drop the casserole at the front door. Thanks.
Don't let the cat out.
And then the people who want to tell you their whole situation, what they went through, which I appreciate to a degree. But at the point of they were telling me, I thought this is what's going to happen with me. And that was scaring the crap out of me. So just offer your support. I'm here. Whatever you need, please. You have my phone number. Call me. My coworkers were incredible with this last go round because I had no idea what I was really going to be going through with recovery of the double mastectomy. It knocked me on my butt, and I wasn't expecting that. So the fact that my family, they did a food, a meal train. The fact that my family was taken care of, and I didn't have to even think about that. All I had to think about was getting better and doing what I needed to do was a huge help. So offer that kind of stuff, and don't even offer, just do it.
Right. To tell someone that has cancer, like, would you think of some things that I can do for you? The moral of the story from everyone that I've known is just frickin' do it. Don't ask them to come up with a list for you. Just do something, whatever it is, or call and leave a message or a text and don't expect a response. Just say, I'm thinking of you, or this sucks. Give permission to the person to be pissed about getting cancer.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be Mary Sunshine and think, everything's going to be okay. At the time when you're really in pain, you don't want to hear everything's going to be okay. You want to hear, hey, I'm just thinking about you. Just to know that you're not by yourself and that you are still, I was away from work for 8 weeks after my double mastectomy. that you're not forgotten, that people are still thinking about you even 8 weeks after. I mean, people were incredible. And it made me regret that I didn't let people know the first time around, because the support I received was immensely helpful.
If someone says to you, obviously this podcast is called This is Cancer, how would you encapsulate or summarize like this cancer experience twice for you? I know Patrick kind of asked, like, what'd you take of it, but how would you describe it or impart kind of your whole journey with it to someone that hasn't gone through it or that's just starting?
It's survivable. You can get through anything. You're strong. I was good the first time around. The second time around, I was a basket case just because I didn't know what to expect. And now I'm having to think, what next, But it's survivable. Go find the best physicians you can find. I mean, you're worth it. I don't care what you got to do. You've got to find the place where you feel comfortable. I have loved every person that I have encountered on my journey as far as doctors and physicians and nurses. And I mean, everybody is there to help you. I remember going in for my double mastectomy, and I was a wreck. I was an emotional wreck that morning. And they called me back, and the nurse walking me back, she said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm scared." And she said, "You're here for a double mastectomy, right?" And she stopped right there in the hallway. She turned around and she hugged me. And she said, "I was there 2 years ago. You can ask me anything you want to know." And she was with me the whole time. And that's just, people have lived through this and glean from their experiences, learn what they know, and then take that and apply it to just be fortuitous about going after this and just taking care of it in whatever way you have to. Don't let it beat you. You've got to beat it. And, I hope that I'm on that path, and I'm going to get there. I know I will. But sometimes you look down that road and it doesn't seem like there's an end in sight just yet. But there are people who can help you get past that. Rely on your friends, rely on your family, and know that you are loved by so many people who want to see you get better.
I think it's proof. The proof is in the pudding that you're willing to talk about it way more than the first time, because this is your first day back in the office. And we're like, "Hey, would you like to come talk about your cancer on a podcast?" Welcome back, Aleta.
Yeah, it's a great first day back.
The caveat was that Aleta said we will never speak of this again, though.
That's right.
All cancer talk. There'll be a moratorium.
Well, it's not easy
talk.
to reveal this to the world, but it's all good. Yeah, you don't sweat the small things, for sure. And my husband and I have gone to a whole new level of familiarity with each other.
Yeah.
Can you please take the liquids off my breast cavity?
Yeah.
My blood grenade is full, husband.
Aleta, on that note, thank you so much for coming and talking. I know there's words that are going to help people listening today, and I know that just like the women that helped you, you're going to afford that same thing to people.
I hope so.
And pass it down. So
Thank you.
super proud of you. I know your journey isn't totally done yet, but you look great, and you're currently cancer-free.
I am cancer-free.
Twice.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming. And no more questions ever again to Aleta about cancer. This is it.
Done.
The blood grenade talk is all staying in.
Yes, it is. Okay, ladies, listen up. If you are 40 and older, you need to be getting your yearly mammogram. I just went and got my mammogram done, and I learned that I am automatically in the high-risk group because my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer before the age of 50. And this means that I can actually get a mammogram once a year, plus get looked at later in the year with an MRI and an ultrasound. I'm going through the assessment process right now to learn how I can use every tool possible to me when it comes to prevention. So please make sure you're getting your mammogram. And if you're in the St. Louis area, Siteman Cancer Center has a mobile mammography van, which is one of the longest running of its kind in the country. And the newest van is actually equipped with that 3D technology that we really encourage all women to try and ask for whenever they get a mammogram. You can check out more about where the van is headed in the coming months in the St. Louis area by clicking the link in our episode description. Don't forget, your yearly mammogram can save your life. So we are back, and we want to thank Aleta again for sharing her story. And now joining us is Dr. Debbie Bennett and Dr. Jennie Romo, both with Siteman Cancer Center. Dr. Bennett, you are the breast radiologist at Siteman Cancer Center. And Dr. Romo, you are the clinical psychologist at Siteman Cancer Center. And we thank you so much for joining us today to talk about how you help your patients when they hear for the first, second, or however many times that you have cancer. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And so, Dr. Bennett, I'd like to start with you about, we talked about as the radiologist, you're the one that reads the scans and the biopsies and decides, okay, this is what we're looking at. Tell me about how you learned to have those tough conversations with patients when you have to deliver that news.
It's a lot of years of learning and training, and I would say we're all still learning and training. There is, an explicit curriculum about how to break bad news, but I would say in my experience and what I try to convey to our trainees, which is our medical students, our residents, and our fellows, is that a lot of what you're trying to learn is how to listen to people and how to listen to what it is that they're telling you without using words. So for us, it's a unique situation in that a lot of the times the bad news that we break is that we think you might have cancer. And interestingly, in my experience, I found that conversation is a lot more difficult for people than the subsequent conversation where you tell them that they do have cancer. Because it's like all this uncertainty about well, maybe I do, maybe I don't. Do you think I might? Do you think I might not? And there are so many unknowns at that point about what is the next month of your life going to look like? What is the next 6 months of your life going to look like? And it's actually a lot easier when you get to the point where you can say, this is what it is, this is what this means, and this is what we're going to do about it.
Because people just spin out when they hear
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things that we try to do when we talk to people is to allow people to exist on this continuum between hope and worry. So we explicitly use those words when we're having conversations with patients. And I try to convey to a patient where I am on that continuum for them, based just on the pictures that we're seeing, on their symptoms, whatever it is, so that I can kind of prepare them for what's coming down the pike. So a lot of people end up needing a breast biopsy. For a lot of people, it's really just to be safe. We think it's almost certainly going to be fine, but we just want to make sure. In those patients, it's very much a conversation about I'm really hoping and expecting that this is going to be okay, but I think we should do the biopsy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the far end of the spectrum where we'll say, I'm worried about this, just to present a space for that person to say either, what are you worried about? And for them to introduce that word, do you think this could be cancer? And that allows us to follow up, or for them to just sit where they are and say okay, I got it. You're worried. We'll do the biopsy. We'll move on. Because people are in all sorts of different places where you have that initial conversation.
Well, just the worry alone. Obviously, Patrick, as a lung cancer survivor, and I had one ultrasound for my breast that there was a spot and they were worried about. And I was literally having panic attacks and migraines because it was over Christmas break. And so they're we're going to look at it. And then everybody was gone for a week and a half. And I was I remember vomiting and I was envisioning my children growing up without their mother, right?
Totally.
I was just convinced because I could feel this little...
Yes.
Man,
and
you really spun out.
I spun out.
They told me I had lung cancer, and I was like, all right.
No, yeah, right.
Well, I'm going to get a sandwich. Let's think about this.
When they told you, I remember talking to you after they told you that they were worried.
Yeah. No, I totally spun out. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. It's very, very real. And I do like you talking about that concept of I'm worried about, because that does allow the patient to say, okay, let me accept what that worry sounds like and return back with, okay, what level of worry and what do I need to start preparing myself for?
Right.
Do you remember the first time you had to tell someone?
I do.
Okay.
It was in fellowship. So fellowship is a step between residency where you're really learning how to do it and being in practice by yourself. And I was sitting with one of our nurse practitioners who typically would give a lot of the results, and she was just watching me. And I was so nervous. I still get nervous when I have to go in and break bad news, when I have to tell somebody that they have cancer. I feel my own blood pressure rising.
Oh gosh, I bet.
Because it is painful. I mean, you hate to do that to somebody else, but at the same time, I think there's a way to do that where they hear what you're saying, they accept it, and it's not it is a terrible experience, but it's not like a totally terrible experience. And so, yeah, I mean, I remember the office where she sat, this teeny tiny little office, no windows, like pulling up the patient's information in the medical record, like staring at her phone number, being like, can I make this call? It doesn't feel natural to have to tell somebody that they have cancer. But if you are supported by the people around you, by people who know what they're doing and can teach you, that there are like concrete ways to deliver bad news, it makes it just a little bit easier.
Do you remember how she took it?
Fine. That was and I wonder if she had not taken it fine, if I would still be doing what I am doing today. Right. But it was very much, Patrick, like what you were saying, she was like, okay, so what do we do next?
Yeah.
There's such a continuum. And so many of those initial emotional reactions, they're just natural. And so your personality comes through. Some people are kind of like, okay, what's next? And it doesn't hit them until later. And then other people, might need that space to, spin out, have a bit of an internal meltdown, and they're not even hearing or kind of encoding the rest of the conversation. So it's just such a continuum. And I want to emphasize, I think all of it is really, really natural.
Yeah. Dr. Romo, I think it's so interesting because you had mentioned that you used to work with VA patients that had been in combat and been through trauma. And one of the things that I have realized from watching people that I care about, including Patrick, including my sister, including a couple of my good friends, is how traumatic hearing you have cancer and the subsequent things you have to face after hearing that. So talk a little bit about why sort of the psychological side of hearing you have cancer is so important to address.
It's such an important part of the picture, especially when we're thinking about people, human beings, the human side of cancer. People are going to cope in different ways, and they're going to cope using their kind of go-to strategies. And oftentimes when we go through things that are traumatic or just completely, surreal or life-changing, our kind of ordinary strategies just don't seem to cut it. And so having a space to really process your feelings, think about what you're feeling, and talk about it. I mean, it becomes a really critical part of that first step in the journey. I like to tell patients, this is a marathon. Mentally, emotionally, we want to kind of help you prepare for getting through a lot of different steps here, right? And so we're not going to treat this as a sprint, and your emotional well-being, it's going to be critical at every step of the way.
I was wondering, Dr. Romo, if you find that people sometimes wait too long to take that healthy approach. I think too often people kind of wait till they get to their breaking point when they realize, I can't just white knuckle this anymore.
Yeah. I think it really varies. Mm-hmm. And the folks that we see sometimes are a self-selecting bunch. I think sometimes psychotherapy can just be a scary word, just like cancer is a scary word. And a lot of people, especially, when you're kind of trying to wrap your mind around initial doctor's appointments, treatments, there's, again, a natural feeling of overwhelm. And so sometimes those emotions or the emotional component goes on the back burner. But yeah, we do often find that, people are coming in maybe at a higher level of distress than I would hope, right? Like we're here before it needs to get to that stage. And I think we're also trained and we're here to kind of meet people where they're at.
You almost feel like it should be required.
In some cases, yeah.
Like everybody should have to meet with you once, and then they can decide whether it was helpful or not helpful.
That sounds like a very smart idea to me, because I definitely should have prioritized something like that.
On our inpatient service, we do have distress screenings, and actually on outpatient services as well. Patients should be offered distress screenings. Yeah. And so there is kind of a cutoff point at which your treatment team would offer our services. But even for, family members or caregivers, those are folks who aren't getting the distress screening. And we're here, I think, getting in sooner rather than later can go a long way.
But Siteman offers resources to support the patients, family members, caregivers, right? Like it's a holistic approach to the mental health side of cancer. And I know that you said you're one of a few cancer centers that offer this. Why is that? That is shocking to me.
Well, we're one of the few major cancer treatment centers that offers free psychotherapy. So there you'll find support at lots of places. But what we've been able to do, I'm on a team of 7 psychologists. We also have some trainees. We have some fellows, some interns who rotate through with us. But we offer time-limited, brief psychotherapy, usually 8 to 10 sessions. We don't bill through insurance. It's free of charge. And we do one-on-one psychotherapy as well as groups. And it's a great way for people to kind of have a space to process, again, that initial diagnosis or kind of that marathon of treatment or survivorship, right? Where you're adjusting to this new normal and thinking about recurrence. It's a great way to get support and kind of figure out how to navigate what moving forward looks like.
So I have a question for both of you about cancer itself. And there are so many things and advances that have been made in cancer treatment, right? And we know that especially if you catch breast cancer early, your rate of survival is in the 90%,
yeah,
right?
99% and higher. Yeah.
So why do you think cancer is still such a bad word and scares us all for the rest of our lives for someone that's been diagnosed or loves someone that's been diagnosed?
I think it's because you never know if you're going to be in the 99% or in the 1%. At least that's my personal feeling. I talked about with some of my friends, like I had my first mammogram. I turned 40, had my first mammogram. I do this every day. Like those statistics about survival and how well people do and if you catch it early, et cetera. Like I know those statistics in and out. And when I had my first mammogram, the thing that I felt was fear. Like, what if I have breast cancer? And what if I'm in that small minority that doesn't survive? And I think that I think that's a natural human reaction. I don't know. Dr. Romo can tell me if I'm just weird, but
please just say no. You're just weird. That'd be so funny if Dr. Romo.
It's just you. No.
That's really weird.
I don't know. I think that immediately that's where people's minds go. And so we very much try to rein people in and set expectations from the very beginning. Even if I tell somebody I'm really worried that this is breast cancer, if I know that this is the kind of breast cancer that's going to be treatable, we say that.
So I'm curious, when you have these free sessions for men and women, what's the percentage of women that are coming and the percentage of men?
I would say we have I don't have the exact numbers, but it's a pretty even split.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. Because just from being a woman married for, 17 years.
I would have said the same thing.
Right.
I make all of my husband's doctor's appointments.
Right.
That felt like you were lining up to take a shot at your husband there.
I just, in my experience with the men in my life that I know and love or might be friends with, I do know that it is not the most natural desire for a lot of men that I know to want to go talk about their feelings.
Taking a lot of on-air shots at me.
See how Patrick's stuttering? I can remember coming in to talk with you in the editing bay and saying, okay, I'm concerned about you. What do you think about this? He always would call me like his nagging big sister, but I would have concerns about how he was managing because while Patrick was also going through his lung cancer treatment, his dad was also going through treatment. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So what can you...
So I have to talk about my stuff now?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is... hearing both of you guys talking about this stuff just affirms so many things that, that I know I should have done or probably should still be doing to make sure that I'm handling my own, cancer journey properly. But yeah, I mean, there's several times where I really could have used a mental check-in like that because it was very overwhelming for me. I was the primary advocate for my father who was going through the worst, hospice, we lost him last year. And it was during that time, my nerves were so shot all the time. And I feel like it was manifesting physically. There were times during my dad's hospice where I was convinced that my cancer was back was rampantly advancing, and I just felt like I could feel it in my body. And I just stuffed it down to just deal with the problem at hand. But I was basically convinced that we're going to get my dad through hospice, go through all this terrible stuff, and then I'm just going to get punched in the stomach going in for my own scan. And they're going to say, surprise, it's metastasized and is everywhere, and you will also be dead in a year. You can't help spin out. You talk about, the stats, you get a mammogram, but you feel fear.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm alluding to myself when I'm like, do people ever come to you and they've just already completely spun out
All
about
the time,
this stuff?
every day.
Because that's basically what I would have done probably.
Yeah.
I remember you saying, I feel it right here. I'm pretty sure what I'm feeling right now, that the cancer's back. I remember when you said that to me. And then you went and got a scan, and they're like, it's clear, and we think it's the reaction from the trial drugs that's causing that, like, whatever that feeling is that you were having.
There's just so many variables, and you don't know what's what, and you're trying not to spin out, but you can't help it sometimes. And yeah, a lot of those things manifest, and I try not to like WebMD it too much. I don't literally WebMD anything, but like I'm just very attuned with my own body. And if you feel something that you haven't felt before, I can't help but go, that's cancer. You start jumping at shadows and, scanxiety and all that stuff.
Something we talk about a lot, scanxiety, and there's just so much waiting. That's what a lot of people come in talking about, that they kind of have this sense of urgency, and why would you not, right? And they'll ask us, well, does my treatment team have the same sense of urgency? Why am I waiting for this scan? Why aren't we doing this tomorrow? What's the holdup?
Help me, you idiots! Right. I'm dying.
Right.
What are those radiologists doing anyway?
Right. Well, that's
sitting around eating bonbons.
That's a fair question, because I'll always talk with people and be like, well, what's taking so long? So tell me a little bit about that. What does take so long? And I would imagine it's because you guys have to look at this and get it right.
Yeah, usually the wait, at least at this point post-COVID, I would say, is in just getting in to get the scan done, not in the interpretation of the scan. I think we're turning around those results pretty quickly, but patients are often having to wait days, if not weeks, to get an appointment for the scan. And we know that those are excruciating. It's just because there are so many patients that need imaging studies, and currently not enough facilities, not enough technologists to run the scanners. We're at capacity.
Is that because they weren't getting treatments during COVID, or they weren't?
A lot of people delayed, care. And I think we're still dealing with a little bit of catch up.
And there's also kind of everything that happens before they get to that point, right? So sometimes people haven't been to their primary care doctor, or they're going into an emergency room visit for something totally unrelated, or they think it's unrelated. But some of what we hear is kind of what happens before they're even at that step of having that first scan and looking at a possible diagnosis. So I think sometimes the journey starts before we kind of see that the way we might kind of see it starting. So.
And I think what you were saying with trauma is spot on, in that it's definitely like PTSD. So we're a little bit unique, I think, in the breast cancer world, in that we still ask women to come back year after year for their screening mammograms, even once their treatment is completed. And every year, people are waiting for the shoe to drop. They're like, this is the year that I'm going to have a recurrence. This is the year that they're going to tell me bad news. And it's, I think, like even just physically being in our breast center, it's like their whole body ramps up. And it's, I think it's the fight or flight response, because like that's the place where they got the bad news. And we ask them to come back year after year.
Absolutely.
I don't think people put enough stake in trauma.
Yeah. Well, and everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but most people this day and age has been touched by cancer in some way. Right? Whether it's them personally, a family member, a good friend. And so there's a lot of kind of preconceived notions, and it might not be the cancer that you've been diagnosed with. It might be a friend of a friend who was diagnosed with a totally different type of cancer, had a different treatment experience, and yet your mind kind of spins out and goes to some other scary places related to information that's not relevant for your particular care.
Yeah, my grandma had cancer and she died within a year. If I get cancer, I'm going to die within a year. And be like, well, that's not That's not very logical, but I get that you're scared of cancer because of this, experience that you've had with it.
Yeah. And you mentioned that we've all been touched, and that's exactly why we're doing this podcast, is for people to have a place to go if they love someone, if they have it, if they've survived, if they just want to hear more about it and preventative measures. I mean, we're going to talk about so many different things and so many different ways that cancer affects people's lives or affects people that you love. And we just hope that, people can take one little tidbit of something from this to grow on or learn from or gain a new perspective.
I just wanted to touch on one thing that you said, Patrick, about you felt like you should have reached out sooner. That conception of should have, what if, is something that we hear a lot from people. And we try to give people the license to get rid of the guilt. Because I think that there is so much guilt about I should have been doing my screening mammograms. I should have felt this earlier. I should have done XYZ, sought help, etc. And I think the truth is, we all are where we are. Something I say a lot is we make the best decisions that you can in the moment that you were making them. And I think that's something that you really fundamentally have to believe about yourself. That it sounds like you were dealing with so much. And the fact that you're still here is
I appreciate
amazing.
that. So that's a very healthy way to think about it. I think my stubborn Irish Catholic background probably prevents me from ever letting myself off the hook. But I need to be looking at it more.
Patrick, I think you just got a tidbit to help you.
A little tidbit. Guys, this podcast is working.
So, Dr. Romo, you mentioned the mental health services that are available at Siteman Cancer Center. What are those, so that if there's patients that are currently there that don't know about it, that they do know about it?
Absolutely. So we offer brief psychotherapy, both individual and groups, for patients who are going through treatment for cancer and their family members, loved ones. You can access our services by just talking to your treatment team, talking to your oncologist, your radiologist, or you can give us a call at 314-747-5587.
So one of the things Aleta mentioned in our conversation with her was how differently she dealt with her first diagnosis versus her second, and how she sort of kept it to herself the first time, didn't reach out for a lot of help. And the second time, it really helped her to let people know more about what she was going through, receive more help. And that was her preference and what worked for her. I love your advice for people that are listening on what you have seen helps patients the most when you deliver that news, whether it be a support system, an advocate, or just an overall attitude in receiving that news. And then Dr. Romo, I'd love to hear from you about what you think has helped too.
I think approaching it with a little bit of openness is helpful, in that I think everybody's natural reaction is this tunnel vision down to the worst case scenario, oh my gosh, I am going to die from cancer. And to take a step back and listen, okay, what are they saying? How is this going to impact my life? And what am I going to do about it? To have those three things in mind. There was another podcast, I love true crime podcasts, which I realize is very far from this genre, but
we haven't got there yet. We'll start incorporating some of that.
Yeah. One of the episodes, there was somebody who was very involved in the civil rights movement, and his advice, I'm sure Dr. Romo can speak more to this, was anytime you get bad news, the three questions to ask yourself are what, so what, and now what? Ooh. And I think that those are very helpful ways to frame it. That I have to say, it's easy for me to sit here and say that, and it's incredibly difficult to remember or think about anything when you are on the receiving end of bad news. So this, like you said, this is not a sprint. It's a marathon. This is the first time that you're hearing bad news. It will be definitely not the last time that this is talked about. So yes, write down what your questions are. You're going to have questions that come up between now and the time that you see your surgeon for your first consultation. Write them down. You're not going to remember them when you come in to talk to your doctor. Bring somebody with you, because what the doctor says, you're not going to hear. It requires another pair of ears to say oh no, the doctor did not say that you were going to die. That is not what they said.
Right.
But I think in the moment, it's just deafening. You hear that word and then that's it.
Right.
That's something we come back to time and time again, is advocacy. I mean, I learned those lessons slowly, but I started recording. I would always ask the doctors, but do you guys mind if I record this? Wrote down questions all the time. Would text my dad and call him before his Wednesday meetings to go, what's going on? How are you feeling? Tell me for real. Because sometimes patients don't come, they're not forthcoming with all of that. But yeah, taking notes, because you can't maintain everything that's being said in those consults. I mean, your head is spinning.
And not being afraid to ask questions, I think, is the other piece of it. If there's something that you're worried about, we want to know about it. Mm-hmm. The thing that is the hardest is when somebody won't say what it is that they're worried about, and you get the sense that there's something that they just want to ask you. So I think our job is to provide the space so that people feel safe and comfortable bringing up what it is that they really want to talk about.
I think that all rings true to my experience working with patients and their family members. I think first and foremost, I try to remind folks to give themselves permission to feel what they're feeling, right? There is a continuum of natural, normal emotional reactions. And so for some people, that might be that fear, worry, panic. For other people, it might be a wave of despair or just overwhelming sadness. For other people, it might be anger and irritability or guilt that we were talking about earlier. So I think just kind of giving yourself permission to know that all of these reactions are completely natural, and really letting yourself have the space to process it in whatever way rings true for you. So for a lot of people, that might be talking about it. For some people, it might not be talking about it at first. It might be kind of gathering your thoughts in a notebook or spending some time outside in nature and thinking. If you're faith-based, you might talk to, someone in your faith community. But so kind of seeking out support and giving yourself time to process those emotions. And then I think, again, what Dr. Bennett was saying, talk to your medical team, talk to your treatment team. I think it's great, and we recommend this all the time. Ask your doctor if it's okay to record what they're saying. Write down what your questions are ahead of time. And if you don't understand your treatment team's response or their answers or some sort of medical jargon, stop them and tell them. It's okay to say, hold on, I need this, repeated, or can you say that in a different way? You're the only one that can know if you're getting the support that you need. And kind of along those lines, you're the only one that can know what's helpful. So you may at first have a lot of family, friends who want to help. People say, what can I do? You may not know what would be helpful at first, but giving yourself some space to actually think about what would actually feel helpful, and then letting people help. Having that person go with you to an appointment or having someone drop off a meal. These are things that, if you can give yourself the permission to kind of let that support in, it can actually, I think, really go a long way.
One thing I'd also like to mention, and something that I think has come up from people that I know, is sometimes the bedside manner or the approach from the doctor might not be well received. And I take this back to a sample I had with my dad. He had a bowel obstruction about 5 years ago and was dying from it. And a doctor came in. I was by myself that night. It was late. He was not conscious and dying. And he said, you need to get a DNR together because, I don't think I can do this surgery. It was someone from like the surgical team, right? And I remember sitting there and I came out, I thought to myself, what? And I came out to the hallway and I said, listen, I need you to tell me again what you said and why you said it and what kind of hope I have because I have to deliver this news. I know that you are a surgeon and you're just telling me what you think, but I need you to understand that I am alone in the hospital with my dad. And I need you to tell me in a way that I can understand and say it. And he immediately calmed down and his whole demeanor changed. And I know we don't always have options to get second, third opinions depending on our health insurance and all that. But I learned from that experience that really sharing with that person to person, this is where I'm at. I felt like it leveled the playing field again because not all doctors can't be as wonderful. Everyone should just listen to you on this podcast and be like, if you have cancer, just listen to this because it'll make you feel better.
There's a learning curve for advocacy as well, for self-advocacy or caregiver advocacy. And so that's the other piece that I try to kind of convey to patients. You're learning. A week ago, a month ago, this was not in your wheelhouse. So a lot of what we're talking about, these are skills that if you never had to do it before, give yourself some grace, like you're figuring out kind of how to do this.
Yeah, and I think, the vast majority of physicians really want to do their best and are trying their best, but we know we don't always get it right. And you never know. Everybody's a person, like what happened to that person right before he stepped into the room. We try to set that aside, but it doesn't always work. So I think having somebody draw attention to, yes, I'm just talking to you as a person. I need to know as a person, what do I tell my family? I think it often does help to reset the conversation.
Yeah. He was just doing his job and, saying, I'm coming to look at him and you need to get this done. But it just changed. And I think that you've had those conversations, as you mentioned as well. And
yeah, we had several conversations like that with through my dad's journey, through my journey. I keep saying journey. I have had a great relationship with my dad's oncology team because we had several of those conversations and then went through 6 years of treatment with them. So every time that we would go into Siteman to talk with Dr. Keller, we were able to, you develop a relationship, and he knew that we need you to talk to us like this, like straight shooting, I don't know, you develop a rapport with people. And it brings me back to a point that I make a lot about this, that there's silver lining in every bad situation, every challenge, I developed a lot of skills through my dad's cancer and my own. I became more proactive. I got better at communicating. I learned to be more open and accept where I am. And, because you don't have much of a choice. You really don't. You can let it eat you up, or you can square up for the challenge, and you're probably going to get sharpened through the process. So as bad a thing as it is to be going through cancer, there's some good that can come out of it too.
I think that's the most important thing, that good can come from bad situations, and hope is so important when it comes to getting this diagnosis. So Dr. Debbie Bennett and Dr. Jennifer Romo, thank you so much for joining us today with your calm, relaxing voices. We're fired now. They're going to start hosting.
Yep, it was fun being the producer on the show for 2 episodes, but we found better talent.
That's right. So a reminder for anyone that wants to talk about cancer or loving someone through it, or just wanting to know how to support, to come back for our next episode of This is Cancer.
Thanks for listening to This is Cancer, brought to you in partnership with Siteman Cancer Center at Barnes Jewish Hospital and Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, national leaders in cancer.
For more information on Siteman Cancer Center, go to siteman.wustl.edu and be sure to leave us a review and like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.